Yeah, and welcome to our live discussion of The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. Very exciting day indeed. So this is our second live show as part of the Royally Booked Club's Cosmerealong, hosted by the wonderful Rachel Marie. So I'm thrilled to have everyone here today. I'm so excited to be hosting it on my channel. So welcome everybody, and thank you Rachel Marie for organising this amazing read along. She will be running the discussion today, so I'll pass it over to you.
Hello everybody. So if you don't know me, my name is Rachel Marie and I'm on literally the channel Rachel Marie. And yeah, I mean, this is like my first experience reading Brandon Sanderson, and I don't know whether any of you joined us reading Elantris, but like I adored Elantris so much. I was balls deep into Elantris. This one, I don't know whether it's like the life situation that we're all in at the moment. It just kind of like affected my enjoyment of the book. So I'm not sure about like how unbiased I can be, but I'm going to do my best. So that's me. And Becca, this is the first time for you as well, isn't it, reading Brandon?
No, this is my third Brandon Sanderson book. I've read Elantris 2 years ago. And I didn't want to reread it because I'm waiting for the sequels. And then I've read Legion, which is the first part of his like supernatural detective novella series.
Yeah.
But they're both very different to Mistborn. I think they've all stood alone so far from what I've read. I really loved The Final Empire. I thought it's my second favorite book of the year. Yeah, I loved absolutely everything about it. Really, yeah, it was good. My favorite Brandon Sanderson so far.
Okay. Catherine is like our resident Brandon Sanderson stan and law expert.
Thank you. Yeah, this was my second time. I feel like I need to like hold up the book as I'm talking about it. But yeah, this was my second time reading it. And it was so fun for me to reread it because I feel like I got all of the old feelings I had when I first read it. And it was just so fun for me. Like, I think The Final Empire is so unique as a first book. And so there's a lot of really interesting things you could say about it. But it's interesting. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say about it because I enjoy The Final Empire way more than Elantris, and I think it's just really exciting. So it was fun rereading this, and I have a lot of thoughts. So I think it'll be really fun to talk.
Yeah. And Jade, I know that you enjoyed this one.
I did. Yeah, I liked it a lot. I had never read anything Brandon Sanderson up until Elantris and now The Final Empire. And I loved Elantris, but after reading The Final Empire, it definitely took over as far as my favorite. And it was, yeah, probably one of my favorite books of this year. And I'm reading a lot of really good books. So I was incredibly impressed by it.
Wow. So I think there are a lot of people here that will have already read the book, but for those of you that haven't or that are watching this back, we're going to be having like a non-spoiler section at the beginning, maybe like halfway through we'll flip, or even maybe just like a third of the way through, because sometimes we're just like so ready to just talk about all the juice. But The Final Empire is, I don't know, kind of like a post-apocalyptic in terms of like a post-Dark Lord winning. So the Dark Lord has won the big great battle and has been in power for 1,000 years, and the world is dark. The world is really grungy, I would say. And the main magic system in this is allomancy, which means that you can ingest certain metals and then burn them within you to give you a certain power. So like you would burn tin to get you something, you would burn, I don't know, steel to get you something else, or iron, I don't know. And I found that really, really interesting. I liked the whole idea behind it. And the kind of main plot for this is we're following one girl who is a Scar, and her name is Vin. And she has had a very traumatic childhood, and she is 16 years old now. And she is taken in by a man called Kelsier, who is trying to like gather a bunch of people together in order to take down the Lord Ruler. And Kelsier is this kind of like wizened, chivalrous, gallant, daring guy, and he wants to encourage Vin to like overcome all her past in order to be able to see how much strength that she has and how powerful she really is. And this is difficult because she has like trust issues, which is one of the things that I think is a bit of a struggle in terms of like such a long exposition for the book. It's a struggle as a reader, or at least I found it as a small struggle, but that's kind of the setup. And yeah, I think other than that, I think we might get into what our thoughts were on like particular points in it. So character-wise, Vin, as I said, she has like a difficult past, and her family have not been great at all. And some would say that she also struggles with PTSD, which is like an interesting way of like including it in this book. And I feel as though that was drawn out in a very human way, as opposed to the way that we see it in a lot of fantasies. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I did find Vin frustrating to start off with. I mean, it's character development. So I think I said in my reading blog when I was reading it that she annoyed me for the first 100 pages with how untrusting she is. Perfectly understandable with what she's been through, and it's definitely like she's supposed to be not necessarily annoying, but being so untrustworthy is a main part of her character that she slowly learns to overcome. And the second guessing does come into the plot in a lot of ways. I did find her character interesting in how I ended up viewing other characters, because there is a point probably about halfway through where Kelsier is doing some stuff. And because we were reading through Vin's perspective, I stopped trusting Kelsier, and I couldn't tell whether it was because Kelsier was now untrustworthy or whether it was because we were reading from Vin's perspective, which I found very interesting. But I really love Vin's character. I love how she has this badass, like, these badass Mistborn powers. And how she's used to running with all these crime gangs, but then she's thrust into this world of luxury and she starts to really enjoy it. And I like that Brandon Sanderson represented that feminine side of her that likes all of this stuff that we don't usually see in fantasy. But then, of course, she's like so badass when she's not attending balls and in dresses. So yeah, I really liked her character overall. I'm interested because I don't know the time scope. Like, I don't know how many years the series goes across, so I am interested to see how her character develops across the whole of the series.
Yeah,
I agree. I think this is a really interesting comment as well. I didn't find her untrustworthy, almost more skittish. It was very interesting seeing how she was at the start of the book to the end, because like you said, so much character development from Vin, and you could see it a lot in how she behaved physically and her mannerisms and things like that. Like, she's, as you mentioned, she's had such a troubled past. She's been through a lot, and it's emphasized quite a bit, especially when Kelsier's perceiving Vin, that she's almost trying to like blend into the background and be as small of a presence as possible. And towards the end, she's like, screw y'all, I'm gonna come and fuck shit up. So she was such a badass, and I really, really enjoyed her as a character.
I personally, so I feel like because I read The Way of Kings like a while ago, that was my first Sanderson book. I feel like when I first read The Final Empire, I kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt in terms of character development, because like, to me, Vin's character development, I was like, oh, this is good, because I felt like her PTSD was really realistic in terms of like how drawn out it was. And the fact that even when she does hit a moment of sort of trusting people, she still questions as if like, are they going to betray me or whatever? So I actually like Vin. I wouldn't say I feel so passionately excited about her until like later books, but this first book I feel like is a really good introduction into showing how dark of a world this is. And I know we'll talk a little bit about atmosphere later, but that's what I really liked, is I feel like this book did a great job at, or at least this first book, introduced this world as dark and gloomy and depressing, and you get that through Vin's character and her experiences. And I felt like it was realistic, and I feel like there's so much more about her that you just have a little bit of a taste of that. Like, there's so much more you could learn about her. And just from this first book, I think her introduction was pretty cool. And I do like Vin as a character. So
yeah, I absolutely adored Vin. I found like Catherine was saying, I found her incredibly realistic in how she starts out, and she really is just like a product of this world and like what this world is like and what it is spitting out. Like, because you have a description of like the Ska being like this super downtrodden group of people, and then you have your main cast of characters who are like really outspoken or like charming and stuff like that, and you kind of need Vin to like show you like there is a strength in the other type of people that aren't necessarily charming. I work with like at-risk youth, and a lot of her behaviors felt so representative of how children will act, even in trusting situations. And like, I also really liked the character arc of her still questioning. It wasn't like she just fell in love with these people and then like, oh, and she found the beauty of trust. Like, it is an ongoing struggle, and I thought that was just so well represented, and I adored her.
Okay, so our other main character, in a sense, Kelsier. I don't want to talk first. Who loves him the most?
I I'm in love with him.
I read his first fight scene, and I was like, wow.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I read it over and over.
I was getting daddy issues reading his reading his sections. I was just like,
I don't even think he's like, I was wondering how old to imagine him, so I went for like mid-30s. I was like, mid-30s is cool, like I can deal with mid-30s.
No, he was not my father. No.
I think I had to keep aging him up in my head because I kept bringing him down closer to Vin's age, but I was like, no, he was married for 10 years, so he's seen some things.
Yeah, I was the same way. When I first read this and I didn't know how old Kelsier was, I was like, are they going to be a thing?
Me too.
Is this going to happen? And at first I was like, oh, I ship it. And then when I found out how old he was, I was like, I don't ship it. Because I had no idea. And then when you realize, I loved their father-daughter dynamic. Like, I do love Kelsier. I'm so glad you, Kelsier I feel like is really interesting. But, like, I feel like he's a great definition of a Slytherin in my eyes. And I loved every moment he had with Vin. I thought it was so precious because her past was so traumatic and her parentage is so traumatic that having those moments with Kelsier, I was like, oh my gosh, she has like her own little father figure. And that was really adorable for me. So I do love Kelsier, but I'll leave it off to you now.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for the spoiler section because there's 2 instances where like the dynamic between the two of them, that father-daughter relationship really stood out to me, but I don't want to discuss them yet. We will wait for the spoiler section because they happen kind of later on in the book. But Kelsier was so interesting. And I was kind of in the same position, like wondering, like, is he trustworthy? What's going on here? Because he does keep a lot of secrets, even from the people closest to him. So he was such an interesting character to follow and kind of try and dissect what his motivations were along the way. Like, I feel like my opinion of him, or like what I thought he was really doing, switched quite a lot, because you find out a piece of information, then you're like, oh, interesting, but he did it for this motivation, which means that, so like there was just a lot going on with his character.
Yeah. Becca, go on then.
Oh, Kelsier.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just really liked him as soon as he came into the story. Maybe about 50 pages in, like I just immediately loved him. And then just how, when you hear about Brandon Sanderson's magic system, right? Like when anybody describes Mistborn, they rarely ever describe the plot. They just say, this is a book about a magic system where you can burn metal and it does stuff.
That's literally
so
it.
I'm like, right, okay, that's like, I don't care. I'm going to read it because everyone says it's good, but that doesn't make me feeling. Yeah. And then Kelsier just like whips out all this magic and starts flying around, and I'm like, whoa. And I don't even like superheroes, and he's like a superhero in the way that his magic manifests.
I agree.
I don't know why I love Kelsier, but I just do. Like, I do like the father-daughter relationship with Ben. I like any type of found family relationships in books. It's one of my favorite tropes. So I really enjoyed that, as well as with the dynamics of all of the side characters as they come together as a group. I also, I can't say anything because spoilers, but I love somebody who, like, I like pain. And, I'm super melodramatic. I love anything that's really dramatic. And what Kelsier does is so dramatic.
So dramatic.
We're not.
I don't know. I like his character, and I love the relationship that they had together, and I liked him bringing out the best in Vin. But I also, just like Catherine, was like mildly confused when he started talking about his ex-wife, and I was just like, hang on. I saw this connection here, and then there wasn't a connection there, and I just like had inputted what I thought was going to happen in my mind onto the pages, and then I was confused. And then she was going to all these soirees, and I was like, she's not going to like that dude. This is a love triangle now. Yeah, it didn't end up being that way. But like, as you say, like, spoiler section, I think that we can dive more into him there. But then there's like a third character who, like, I wasn't expecting at all, with Erland. And Erland is part of like the nobility in a sense, kind of. Would you call it nobility? I think so.
Yeah,
like the aristocrats. But he is kind of rude. He's kind of like going against what father wants, etc. And I like his archetype in fiction, and I like the fact that him and Vin were just like connecting, also just via books, because I'm a book nerd, so that whole situation works for me. But I feel as though the connection that was placed there between the two characters happened relatively quickly, considering Vin's general skittishness.
I feel like you do have to remember as well that she's like 16.
Also, she's
presented with this attractive man who is rich. He's nobility, so I imagine he's pretty good looking and like pretty well dressed.
He doesn't normally show other people attention, and he's showing you attention.
He doesn't behave like everybody else behaves, so she's been warned not to trust these people, but he goes against everything that she's been taught about people that you can't trust. And I think it definitely starts as an attraction. And at this point, she's learning to trust people, and she sees something in him that she would like to trust. But nobody else does. But I really like him. I love him. He's a sweet little cinnamon roll.
He is a cinnamon roll. I would put him in the Hufflepuff category completely.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
And especially since like the first instance that they met, Vin kind of emphasized that she was like, this is the first person that I've met that I felt comfortable around. Like from the get-go, their very first interaction, it was very different from a lot of the other interactions she's had with other people, especially the other nobility. So I think that kind of relationship stood out from the start. I loved the first two scenes that we met him in particular, and the second time that he's at the ball and just like plonks all of his books on the table and was like, hey, I'm going to be here for the rest of the evening. I was like, yes, I love your attitude.
Somebody said, I love Elland as well. Just wait until you keep reading your, yeah.
For me, I feel like when I like Vin and Ellen's relationship because it's just kind of cute and wholesome. But when I first read it and upon rereading it, I was never really obsessed with them as a couple or as a thing. I was always kind of like, yeah, they're cute, like whatever. Whereas some people are like, oh my gosh, they're like forever, like they're so cute. But I don't know. I just feel like their dynamic is not as much of like for me, like this trilogy, this first book specifically, I guess since we're talking about it, I was more so here for the plot and the magic system rather than like the relationships. I was like, well, I mean, I care about the characters, but like Vin and Ellen's relationship was like, oh yeah, they're cute. Like, but I personally, my favorite parts is when Kelsier is teaching Vin how to use allomancy.
Oh, yeah.
Like those first instances, I was like, this is so good. It's like I'm reading this really interesting textbook. But I still think Vin and Ellen are really cute. I feel like I didn't find him particularly rude. I just found him kind of goofy. Like he's just kind of this unaware person. Like, yes, he is a bit like, oh, I'm gonna read whatever, but I more so found him as kind of like, oh, this kid is so like innocent and just kind of like, I'm just trying to read my book, okay? And so I don't know, but so for me, I feel like Vin and Ellen's relationships was really cute, but I wasn't as into it as other people are or were. So
I'm loving the comment section. Like they're kind of ripping into him just a little bit.
Your poetry class.
I will say I did really like where things were going at the start, but I feel like for me, the relationship kind of fizzled out in excitement after those first couple of instances. Like for some reason it became a little more dull, so I wasn't super invested, but I did find him really interesting.
But like, while we're on the topic of those two, without spoilers, just the last line of the book. The last line of the book.
That was really cute. Yeah, that part was cute.
I might go into the last line again.
I didn't cry at like the main cry-worthy part in this book, but that bit, I was like, oh no, and it wasn't even that big a deal, but oh god, it hit me in the heart.
Okay, now I remember.
Yeah, I didn't initially like Ellen. I was just like fine with him. Like I felt kind of neutral. I was kind of like, he gave me like contrarian hipster vibes, like, oh, I don't go to that coffee shop because other people go to that coffee shop kind of thing. And I was like, you're wearing a beanie right now and I just can't do it. But like he did grow on me like the same way he kind of grew on Vin. Well, different because I'm in love with Kelsier, but it was funny to have Kelsier's perspective on him the entire time, because there were so many times where he's just like, he pretty much had my same thoughts about Ellen. He's like, oh, he's just he's all talk. Like he was so lame. He was being such a dad where he's just like, this guy is not good enough for you. He's like, not
I was on the other side. I was on like the Vin side where it's like, not all nobility are the same. Like he's perfectly fine. He's great. Just leave him alone.
Yeah. I was low-key nervous for a lot of scenes where Kelsier was like, yeah, but he's still nobility. And Vin's like, yeah, but can you not do anything to him?
I've actually heard, well, somebody actually said in the chat also that the next book features their relationship quite heavily. So
that's interesting, because I assumed with the way that the book wraps up, I thought that the initial plot would be the entire series. With things wrapping up quite nicely, I assumed that Vin would be going somewhere, so he would be staying, and I thought maybe they'd come back together right at the end of the series. That's interesting, because I thought they'd be in different locations.
I was watching a review for Mistborn a few hours ago, just like to get prepared for these kind of things, and I accidentally ended up in the spoiler section, the comment section. The first one was like a massive spoiler for the entire series. So like I think I know something now. Well, I do know something now that happens in the last book, and I'm just like,
oh no!
It's just that it's completely.
What I think it is. Yeah. I'm gonna be really upset.
Yeah, like to be fair, with this one, I definitely didn't know anything that was going to happen at all. And in fact, I still, when we get to the spoiler sections, as always, I will need to ask you guys questions on what actually happened. So I just need to reaffirm. But yeah, I think that's kind of it in terms of characters. But we've both discussed atmosphere a little bit, and for me, it didn't hit. Like I have it in my mind, the world, but I feel as though everything that I have in my mind is what I've created, as opposed to this atmosphere in terms of descriptive writing and emotive writing. I felt like that was for myself missing.
For me, I feel like Sanderson, at least from what I like, anytime I talk about Sanderson's writing style, I'm like, he doesn't have flowery writing style. Like he tells you as it is. And I feel like it's a very subjective, like, it's a big taste preference, because for me, I do enjoy like Rothfuss's style of writing that's beautiful and just like it's gorgeous. But Sanderson, I feel like I like that he's kind of straight to the point. He's just kind of like, this is how it is. This is what, like, I'm not going to waste my time, you know. And definitely in his earlier books, he kind of repeats certain words that he uses, and he's acknowledged that and stuff. But so I think that's really interesting, Rachel, that you think the atmosphere, like you get that from that writing, and that totally makes sense, because I felt like that too. And I think when I first read this, I felt so immersed the whole time, probably because I was like all alone and I was just binge reading these, and I tend to have those experiences more. But so I think it's looking at writing style, he doesn't have very like special. He just says it how it is, which I think is kind of interesting. But I don't know about you guys' thoughts with that. So
he definitely has a very straightforward writing style. I do find it interesting because he is also a very emotive writer. Like, his books are a lot more character driven and have a lot more emotion than you would expect from such like a clinical writing style, which I do really like about him. The atmosphere, like, I was sucked into that book straight away. It gave me Six of Crows vibes with the setting.
I said exactly the same.
Yeah, like, just immediately as soon as I started reading Six of Crows, like, the atmosphere is just there. And
it's exactly, it's like, but it's got that same grungy, dirty feeling as the one that Leigh Bardugo puts forward in Six of Crows, and I said it, yeah.
With the clothing, I'm not sure, but from the way he described it, it was almost like a 1940s kind of setting, which is the same as Six of Crows, like the same kind of style. I don't know if it's just that setting with me that I find so immersive, because I did read Elantris quite a while ago now, but that's very more a high
medieval
fantasy world than a like more modern high fantasy world.
Well, if they've got metals and they're using them, then they've got, and which I still need to ask about how they exactly use them. Can I ask that now? I think so. I'm just going to like dive in here and just ask, do they carry around bags and vials of metals?
Yes, in alcohol solution.
In alcohol solution.
And then I'm
in their pockets.
Like,
some of them do, or some of them just have beads. Like, so it doesn't necessarily have to be like in a solution. It could be like beads or in liquid or technically anything. So you could have like pills and like pills made of metal and pop them in. And I think they like would do the same thing.
I missed it in the initial setup of the book, and then I was halfway through and they just kept saying, I'm burning this, I'm burning that. And I'm just like, how? So like I must have missed that.
I think once they input them too, they're able to have like, I almost pictured like these different just like areas of almost like stovetops, little miniature stovetops inside of them, where they can like call on that and then just bring it up, so they don't have to necessarily swallow it in that moment. Like,
they had like a few hours to use it before burn it. Like,
So like, as Vin would like jump out to go like chill in the mist, like she would pop a whole bunch of them and then like use them and use the coins and stuff like that. So
yeah. I think, sorry, like we diverted from atmosphere. So how did that connect with you guys?
I think one thing that I thought was interesting and that was questioning throughout the whole book is, like, obviously in the setup, they're talking about how dangerous the mists are. So they talked a lot about how dangerous it is, but because we're getting it from pretty much Vin's perspective, who is a mistborn, she's not really in danger in the mist. And I was like, where are all of these horror stories coming from? Especially when we find out what the mist wraiths are. And I'm like, okay. So it's just, that was one thing that was going through my mind in terms of like the danger element of the world. And I don't know how I feel about that.
I definitely really I liked the atmosphere, not for like, I'm not overly excited when I'm in a dreary place, but it made the stakes feel higher of like when they were talking about like the color of leaves and trees and like flowers and stuff like that, and like that was their goal, that was part of their end game. It made me so wanting of that. Like, it really, like, without needing, and I love flowery writing, like I really, really do. Like Strange the Dreamer is one of my favorite books, and that's slow flower. But it created a world, because like just imagining immediately a world without those sorts of colors and things, just it painted it perfectly for me through empathy of like wanting or not understanding. And I thought that was a really great way of explaining the world and the atmosphere. Like I felt I felt a hopelessness in a way that made me also want them to succeed in their goal. Like I felt like the stakes were high because of the atmosphere.
I think that's probably one of the most poignant scenes for me, when he's explaining to her about the flowers and about the sky and about the leaves, and she's just like, I could never imagine that. Of course
Green?
they're this color
In
like,
nature, everything's
yeah.
brown. What do you mean?
Exactly. And it was
It's
just
interesting about the sky because somebody in the chat has just said I kept forgetting that the sun was red. Until this point I forgot that the sun was red, and
Me
I had
too.
the same issue with Nevernight. Like I kept forgetting that it's Nevernight, like it's literally in the title.
yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's nighttime now, but no, it's Nevernight. It's it's I like it when authors do that. J. Christoph does do it in Nevernight, where they take something like so mundane and strip it from the world, and it just immediately creates a completely different atmosphere.
On the basis that some of us forgot about that, or this conversation has sparked our memory of those scenes, do you think it would have been better if he'd have included more of that continually throughout the story instead of just focusing on the action?
I think it is actually just an autofill kind of situation. Like, as soon as you start reading a book, you fill in the blanks with things that you already know. So you'll read that the sun is red, but then they'll say, oh, it's daylight. So your brain will automatically go, the sky is blue, the sun is out, kind of thing. I think it is just like a automatic what your brain does to paint the setting.
I think, like, and this is going back to the whole atmosphere thing, I think with this first book, his whole introduction and straightforward writing, because he's introducing not just this world, but this magic system and like the complexities of it, I liked that he was straight to the point, because I feel like it would have been so convoluted had he been so flowery with like explaining how metal is burned and explaining like, I don't know, just subtle details. And it's so funny that you brought up Strange the Dreamer, because that's like a book that drove me insane. So I was like, oh, get to the point, please. Like, and I love slow books, but I don't know. I guess I just prefer that kind of straight to the point or kind of light, flowery side of writing. So I don't know. I feel like it worked for me. And that whole description of the red sun, I just always tried to, like, upon rereading it, I had that in my mind much more clearly because I was just taking a lot more notes. And I was like, man, so like just the glow of the city and everything just must look so weird and just brown and red and gray. All of those dark kind of like gross colors mashing together just makes the world so much more depressing. So I don't know. I thought that was really interesting, but it's cool also just like thinking of the red sun in the whole like scheme of the Cosmere. And that whole anyway, I just think it's really interesting, but it's cool to kind of think about that and the other planets and stuff like that. So
I think this comment's really interesting. I like that he doesn't constantly remind you, because to the characters, this is just normal, which I agree with. Though I feel like the way that he addressed kind of like, as I mentioned before, like the danger of the mists, but also how dreary everything is. He's like planting those seeds to explore later when they have the opportunity to go more into the outside world. So as I was reading, it was like, oh, this is very interesting. I feel like it'll come into play later on rather than now, since it was so kind of action heavy and really in the center of Luthadel, and seems from the comments that it does explore more in the later books. So that's exciting. I'm curious to see how it all unfolds.
So we've talked about themes of found family and mental health themes with PSD. PTSD. I was like, PSD. Like, I have been photoshopping far too much. You know, you just like, your brain stops working for a second. You're just like, there was something wrong in that sentence. And for me, like, we did include insta-love as like a general trope and theme. Were there any other themes that stuck out to you? We've got like the father-daughter thing, which is nice, but I think we should probably talk about that more when it comes to like the spoiler section that we'll probably get into in about 5 minutes. But yeah, anything particular that screamed out to you?
I think the whole trope of like not like girls, not like a nobles thing was a big one. And I was recently talking to Heather from Aphrodite Reads. Like, she read this book for the first time, and she was talking to me. She also kind of had like iffy feelings about it, and this is her first time reading it. So to me, when she was discussing with me how something that bothered her and something I found to be really interesting that I didn't initially notice was how quickly Vin was to kind of go, oh, Ellen's not like other like nobles. And granted, I like our points that we brought up with how Elend is different and how he's not like other nobles. But Heather was telling me how she found it to be a little interesting that Vin was so quick to go, no, the nobles are not all bad, when her people were oppressed for so long. And when she was talking with, I think she was talking with Doxson or Ham or somebody else, they were kind of like, Vin, why are you acting this way? Like, you are a Ska. I thought we were trying to take down these people. So I think that whole trope in that, like, Vin's relationship with her oppressed people, but then finding a guy that she really cares about was really interesting, and how well that was inserted in the book. So that might be something else we could discuss as well.
Yeah. Well, I think, ultimately, obviously, one with her being 16 and also her past, if you put yourself in that situation, you almost want your past to be healed. And in order for your past to be healed, you think that potentially you need to find people of that same person that attacked you and find redeeming qualities in them. And this is just like a circular way of breaking trust and creating trust with people who are part of the same group. But this is just,
I think as well, one of the first things that he says to her is something about the scar, and like I can't remember what exactly it is he says when he first meets her, but every time they meet in the first few instances, he says something about Scar that leads her to believe that he's not like everybody else. So I think him being like that just openly contradicts everything that she's been told about him. Because from a reader's perspective, like, it does perfectly make sense that not all nobility is evil. Like, you could even just compare it to white privilege. Like, not all white people are evil, but privilege is ingrained into you, and sometimes you don't realize that you're doing things wrong because it's just how you do things.
I like one of the comments in the chat that said it's kind of like a play on the no one is a villain, which we'll definitely get to as well. But like, that whole concept in this, I like the fact that everybody is a little bit grey and everybody is a little bit untrustworthy and we're not too sure. So a few people were screaming about Sazed in the chat, which I really, really, really want to get to. But also, I think I know a spoiler again for like later books. So I was just like, I was like, is this thing going to happen? Just like, it's all a mess. It's basically it's my own fault because I'm watching non-spoiler reviews of one book, and then it's the comment section. They're just like, "Oh, I'm really sad that this happened," and I'm just like, "Bitch, really." So, we'll see. Because I don't know everything, but I know certain things. But what did we? Because I thought that he reminded me a lot of. I thought that he was potentially the character that we see duplicated in all the different books. I'm looking at Catherine to see, but I think she's frozen. So there's a character that hops between all the different books.
Oh yeah.
And just I loved the fact that he was like this super, wise and like wizened, and also just like caring, and I just find him really, really interesting as a character.
I think in the Final Empire, isn't he the informant?
Yes, Hoid.
Is that the one where Kelsier goes and asks him about stuff, and then he's feeding him false information? Yeah. I didn't know. I knew that there was a character that jumped around, but because it's been so long since I read Elantris, I had to go back and I went on a wiki page and read the bits from Elantris and Mistborn, like where he'd been in, because I forgot who he was by the time I was reading the Final Empire. I'm very interested in him. I think everybody is, because I believe he's having his own series or something. I don't know if it's a book or a series. It's called The Dragon Shard or The Dragon something, I think. I was talking to Cody about it a couple of weeks ago, where you will find out his origins and the point of his character.
That sounds fascinating.
I think
what it is
I like things like that where things connect together.
Yeah.
So now that I know who he is, I will be paying much more attention to him. But I forgot when I was actually reading the Final Empire that I was supposed to be looking out for him.
Well, the chat is screaming about him.
I totally forgot that I was supposed to be looking out for Hoid, because I remember in the last live show you and pointing at Catherine, but you can't tell. You had said, oh yeah, he like pops in and pops out of different stories. And I was like, I will make sure to remember that. Did not think about it this entire book. And then the moment you said it, Rachel, I was like, oh.
Well, sometimes they don't say his name. Like there's certain books where like he'll be like kind of like a beggar or so. Like they'll refer to him as, oh, he's this person. And you're like, is this Hoid? You're like, is this the Hoid? So sometimes you have to like look up and go, wait, where does Hoid show up again? Because I can't remember. So it's totally like normal. The fact that they like call him Hoid in this book and then in Elantris, or yeah, at the end of Elantris, you're like, oh, okay, that is Hoid. But then in later books, you're like, is this who I'm supposed to be? Yeah.
Because I didn't know how prevalent a role he played in other books. So I thought, okay, this could be Hoid because he just had like a very similar vibe. But did like Sarzed scream out to any of you guys in terms of like a character? Do you have any feelings towards him?
Oh, so many warm
My heart.
feelings towards him.
He immediately stood out to me as a character. Like,
I didn't love him. Like I liked him, but yeah, like I've been reading other people's reactions and stuff, and like Kaz seems to love him. So I don't know why everybody like loves him so much. I enjoyed his character. I like him, but
He reminded me of Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender. As far as, like, I mean, aged up, but like that's his trajectory. I immediately when he becomes a more prevalent character after a Vin fight scene, just so I'm trying to after that moment, I very much so like had a deeper connection and adoration for him just because of how gentle and thoughtful he was, and the fact that I then knew more about his power level.
Yeah.
This is as unspoilery as I can. Yeah, I just ended up really enjoying every page that he was on.
We never went over star ratings. So before we go into spoilers, maybe we'll just go around the group and tell everybody where you are on the scale. Kaz.
I think I'm gonna give it a 5. Like it wasn't perfect. There were some small things, but I think overall I just had a very emotional experience with it. Like the start of it was a bit slow for me, but by the end I was like invested.
We saw you just like descend into madness on a 6-hour live stream, and you were just like, I have to leave it here. You just like emotional towards the end. Like if you don't give a book 5 stars after being like,
it got worse. Oh my gosh! When I was reading after the live show, I was. We will discuss. But yeah, I think 5 stars.
You were like, I think that I need to leave it here.
Yep.
I'm like,
exactly.
Becca.
I gave it 5 stars. Yeah, immediately from I don't like the prologue to that book. I've read the prologue in a Try a Chapter Tag before, and I didn't really like it then either.
It feels so different.
Yeah. As soon as we got into the story, I was pretty sure I was going to give it 5 stars, and it just got better from there. So I think there were a couple of points in the middle where it dipped, but it was very much character development, which then proves relevant towards the end. So the pacing was a little bit on and off, but yeah, 5 stars, loved it.
I also gave it, well, I'm keeping my 5-star rating because my first experience is so unforgettable. It's not my favorite in the Mistborn trilogy, but I feel like it's such a solid first book, and I just have a lot of fond memories for first read, and then like rereading it, I was like, I really love this book still, and I can't not give it a 5-star rating, so I'm keeping it that way.
I'm definitely giving it 5 stars.
Yay!
Sorry.
There's nothing to apologize for.
I know. Rachel.
Rachel's
the odd one out.
I know. That's why I apologize.
Yeah,
anytime I'm in a live show with Rachel, she always is the odd one out.
I don't mean to be.
Rachel's not like other girls. That's
Yeah.
Not like other nobility.
No, it's because I'm a queen. Excuse me. Not like other girls. Because thank you. No. No, I just, like I said at the beginning of the live stream, I think that this is a Rachel issue and not a book issue. And I actually feel like I actually feel like I'm going to take the rating off it and just like not rate it. If I was to rate it right now, it would be a 3 stars. But because I know in my mind that it's a Rachel problem, not a book problem, it kind of feels unfair to put it on Goodreads as a 3-star when it's probably objectively a 5-star book. And so enjoyment rating, 3 stars. Love the magic system. Yeah.
I'm really interested to see what you're going to rate Royal Assassin now, because when we did Robin Hobb last time, you said you couldn't give Assassin's Apprentice a 5-star having just read Elantris. So I'm really interested to see what the rating for that's going to be now.
I've not started Royal Assassin because I'm trying to wait for my slump to finish. But I have just started the Poppy War, and that was like the first 3 chapters. So good. The first 3 chapters, I'm like, whoa, I'm in, I'm hooked. Emotive writing, stunning.
Okay,
so I was just like,
oh, sorry.
3 chapters. You need
3
to catch up. Yeah, we're buddy reading it
today.
Yes.
I don't like Poppy War.
Well, that would make sense, Becca, because we're always contrary with one another.
True. I know if you love a book, not to read it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Pretty much, that's how our friendship goes.
That's hilarious.
Just like, Becca, did you like that book? No? Brilliant, I'll read it. But before we move on to spoilers, I also want to ask Catherine, like, have you done a tier ranking video for all Brandon Sanderson books yet, or are you planning to do one?
Yes, I am. I wanted to. So I'm having a Cosmere video coming out this Tuesday that I've pre-filmed, like a kind of guide to the Cosmere sort of thing. And yes, I am going to be rating them, but part of me wants to wait until I've reread all of them, and then when book 4 of Stormlight Archive comes out, I might wait just so I can have that on my list because I want to like rank it. So yeah, at some point I totally will, but I'm not sure when. I just want to like really, I think I know where I would place things, but I really want to do that video. So yeah, stay tuned.
Nice.
Excited.
So, spoiler time. No holes barred. If you're still here and you've not completed the book, which I highly doubt it because like we've got a lot of stands in the comments, but it's going to the spoiler time. So I have questions. Kelsier died. Kelsier died and didn't come back.
Yep.
I was really expecting him to come back in some kind of way. Like, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was like, something's happening.
I mean, he did come back in some kind of way.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
Becca.
Oh no. Okay, sorry, keep going.
I thought that I was the same because my thoughts were, oh, what did like the Kandra like do some sneaky thing before the Lord Ruler came along? It ended up being like kind of the opposite, and it wasn't until afterwards because I didn't realize what he was. So I was like, oh, he's coming back. 10 pages later, I was weeping as it like sunk in. I was like, oh no, they're getting really emotional about this, and it's not in the kind of oh, we're giving you false hope kind of way. It's like, no,
it's really happening kind of way.
Yeah, Sanderson's not a coward. I will say that right now. Like when I first read this, I was like, yeah, right. Like no way. Like of course he's coming back. And then I kept reading and I was like, oh, this dude's dead. Like he's gone. So, and upon rereading it, I was definitely more so like, wow, like that was very brutal, but it was a much more significant role. And I'm so excited for like, I'm so hyped. So just wait.
Did nobody see it coming?
No.
Well, there's a meeting, the first meeting that they put together with the Scar where they're trying to recruit them to the armies. Kelsier starts to be very flashy about his magic, and it's from his perspective, and he says that he's putting on a show, and he's doing it very purposefully so that he can become a martyr. Like
I didn't make that connection though.
The further we get into the book, the more he's doing it, and the more everybody's like, "Why are you doing that?"
See, I stupidly believed when everyone was like, "Oh, he's just like building up his own ego." Like I didn't question that.
Yeah.
Therefore, it came at a left field for me, and I was.
It's interesting because I think young adult has conditioned us to believe that when a character dies, they're going to come back. But Kelsier is a character that for the first time in a long time, when he died, I knew he was dead. Like, I didn't expect him to come back.
Yeah.
Well, in order for Vin to continue with her storyline, you have to like kind of shake off the mentor. And normally with these kind of books, especially like more YA style, like the mentor comes in and then the mentor leaves and the character has to figure it out on their own. Whereas this one is like the first story in an arc, even though this is contained in an arc on its own. And so this is just like the beginning part of, you would normally have like a story, the mentor dying, and then the protagonist can go on.
Mm-hmm. Becca, I was kind of like you when I, sorry, I mean, you. When I first read this, I was like, yeah, Kelsier will probably die at some point in this series, but I didn't expect him to die in the first one. Not to mention the Lord Ruler, which we'll get involved in. I was like, what are you going to do now? Like, what, like your plot, what's the point now? Like, I was so confused on first read, and then it comes together so nicely. But I think like sort of seeing Kelsier dying, I was like, oh yeah, he might die at some point. But when he died in the first book, I was like, nah, he's gonna come back. Like, and then he didn't, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, Sanderson's not a coward, that's for sure.
I'm a coward.
I didn't expect it to be there, but I had a feeling as soon as I started and we had two protagonists and one was older than the other one and had already kind of lived a life and done so much, I had a feeling he would definitely die at some point. I thought that it could possibly be at the end of the series, but as the story went on, I was seeing what he was doing. But I definitely expected it to be the thing at the end of the book. I thought that would be his death, and then I thought that his death would be the catalyst for them actually overthrowing the Lord Ruler, because up until this point, they still kind of thought it was impossible. So I thought it would turn into like a personal vendetta for Vin to take down the Lord Ruler, and that would take up like a whole book.
When it happened and we had so many pages left, I was feeling like, oh, we won't actually do it then, because Kelsier was like the linchpin in making everything happen. And without him, I have no idea how my characters are going to be able to like do the thing that they're meant to do. But I still, can anyone actually tell me again how he died? Just like say it again in words and say like,
didn't the Lord Ruler pull out one of the spears from his chest and was just like, and it happened so fast.
He did something else to him as well. He made sure he was dead.
The Lord Ruler backhanded Kelsier so powerfully that he spun, spraying blood as he fell, and then half of his face is like, sorry, content warning, but half of his face is, sorry, a little too late for that. I'm sorry.
They've all read it.
Yeah, we all read it, but yeah.
Okay, but what made me cry so much was like when he's like, I'm gonna tell Mare about you. She would have loved to have a daughter. And it's just
I don't know, I've got goosebumps.
Oh,
that whole part was so precious.
Oh, like the scenes with, that's what I was talking about with like the father-daughter relationship, and that just like nailed it home. But also the other instance where Vin was like, are you gonna leave me too? And I
just, yes. And then he said I can't promise that, and I was like,
I should have known then. I was like,
I thought about that scene after the fact so many times. I was like, in the moment I was just like, because he can't guarantee his life when he goes to save, but he already knew he was gonna
I love seeing you guys' reactions for this, because I was the same. I was like, oh my gosh, he wanted a daughter, and Vin is kind of his little child he can take care of. And then like his death, I felt was so brutal. And I was like, yo, this dude's face is missing. Like, what happened? Like when I first read that, I was like, what? He has no face. And then like this half smile he gives, and then Vin's like, you promised you wouldn't leave me. I was like, oh shoot, that was brutal. Like, that sucks, man. So
You know, it kind of slightly reminds me, and this is probably like downgrading it a lot, so please forgive me, everybody, but this slightly reminds me of like the scene in the last Twilight movie where they have like the full sequence and the things happen. No spoilers for everybody who's not watched Twilight, just in case, but like there's a whole scene and things happen and like everything happens and you're just like, how the hell are you doing that? And when you see Carlisle and you're like, oh.
People keep
Oh my
posting a
God.
screenshot of that on Twitter, and I was thinking, I don't remember that ever happening, but it's not real, is it? Every time I see it, I'm like, whoa, when did that happen?
That's actually a really great comparison. I love that you brought that up. Because it's kind of the same, like, what?
Father figure. Yeah. That was yeah, that's my kind of like reaction to it, I guess. Oh, Kaz.
Aw.
This is too raw.
Yeah, because you finished it yesterday.
Yeah.
Again. At least it was just like at least 6 hours before the live stream. Not an hour.
Oh.
Oh, so funny. But like
I read the last 200 pages in a day, which was intense.
Mm-hmm.
To be fair, like I think I read this over the course of a week, but I was listening to it audibly, which again was my issue. So, like I say, it's all my fault. I wanted to discuss something with you guys actually because I was watching Murphy Napier's review on this, and she said that originally, of course, this was an adult fantasy. I don't know whether Catherine knows about this, and then so. It was labeled as adult fantasy, and then a different publisher picked it up. And when the different publisher picked it up, they actually called it a YA.
Yeah.
It's interesting because in the UK, all of Brandon Sanderson is published as adult. So even Skyward and stuff and Steelheart is all adult. So
UK is a little bit different, I think. I think our adult category includes more than the American does.
I think in the UK, young adult is actually more teen.
Yes.
So the stuff that's like older young adult is normally pushed into adult fantasy anyway.
That's really interesting that Skyward and Steelheart would be in there because those are definitely like kind of younger YA in my eyes. But I think that whole point you brought up, it was a whole marketing ploy. Like Mistborn, I consider to be like a lower high fantasy because it feels, at least for me, it feels so much easier to get into. I'm like, oh yeah, this is way faster than so many other. But I still consider it adult. I think it was just mainly YA because it was like, oh, look, another edgy YA we can put and sell and try to do that. But I think it is a really interesting point to put up in terms of like how they decided to market Mistborn because I think people still think it's YA. But it's interesting, so.
I do feel as though it deals with darker themes than a lot of the YA genre. However, we do follow a 16-year-old character who is trying to find herself, and there is this morality issue. There's a big bad and her going against the big bad, which is part of YA. It's part of like, who do I stand by and who do I trust and who am I and who are they? So I do think they're right a little bit, and then you also have the unnecessary romance potentially between her and Elend. It was nice and it was lovely to have included, but I think that he could have delved into it deeper for it to have not been so surface level.
From what I've read of YA recently, I don't think there's anything in Mistborn that could make it not YA. I think when it was originally published, YA didn't really exist, especially in terms of dark, gritty, epic fantasy.
Yeah.
So I think at this point, it could be YA.
It's 15 years ago.
Moving it, but nothing in it that is so overtly against it being YA that it couldn't be.
Well, if you put, like you say, if you put it against YA fantasies of today, then yes, because the genre has aged up, just like Daniel Green has been saying recently. But YA back then was Twilight. And it's like chalk and cheese, in my opinion, apart from the Kelsier scenes.
I think I've definitely read books that are as graphic as The Final Empire. I mean, the only real graphic scene is in the fighting scenes and stuff. And then the complexity, the way that Brandon Sanderson explains everything, it's very accessible for readers of a wide age range.
Yeah.
I mean, the themes, morality, versus evil. We have a young protagonist. So yeah, I don't see the point in moving it unless they're just trying to sell more copies. But do they really need to? Because Brandon Sanderson's like an instant buy author.
Yeah.
But yeah, it could be YA readers. I'd say like 16 plus would be comfortable reading it.
The book Leo in the chat, actually, I watched one of her recent reviews also, and she reviewed it 3 years ago and gave it like a 3-star as well. And she said there's nothing in it that makes it not YA, but also nothing in it that makes it kind of adult. So I think a few people earlier also said it's a really good bridge book to bridge the gap between young adult and adult fantasy. And people are saying that also we don't need fantasy. We don't need romance in fantasy. There's enough romance about, which I
like
feel,
romance in fantasy.
But they could have stretched out her relationship with Elend, like you said, until book 2. Like it didn't have to all happen in
That's
this
what I was
one.
expecting to see.
Yeah.
I was expecting it to be a lot more of a slow burn, especially because it like, I mean, there is definitely attraction at the start, but I just didn't think it would come to.
But nothing happened.
I know,
They
but it was
right at the end. That's it.
But like, I feel like their feelings still drove a lot of their actions toward the end, even though there wasn't like a kiss or anything like that.
It was like ride or die out of nowhere.
It didn't feel out of nowhere to me. It like I don't know. For like I think that romance, like the kissing and stuff like that, can add to something, but when they're like connecting that much and stuff like that, and then you have like a crisis happen, you're
true.
going to be thinking about like the people you care about and the connections you have, and like the stakes feel higher, and you're more likely to gain connection just through having that like combined. You're both having a trauma in that way, or you're experiencing something. It creates higher stakes, and I feel like it would naturally not feel false emotions, but it definitely makes you go, okay, this is important to me, so I'm going to solely focus on this because I don't have to focus on other things because I'm in crisis. So,
yeah, that totally makes sense. I think it was more my expectation of what it was going to be like that. Like I put my assumptions on the relationship at the start and I was like, oh yeah, it'll be a super slow burn. We won't see much of anything, especially since in Skyward, the romance is like, there's one tiny seed. And I haven't read much. I don't think I've seen much romance in any of his other books. So I was like, maybe it'll be similar to that.
I also think they just had a friendship. I don't think that all of their motivation and actions were driven by love or even like strong romantic feelings. I think that they also just connected and cared about each other. Like, and again, I wasn't like super steamed up about their romance. It made sense to me as far as like they have a connection and they don't have a lot of connections with a lot of other people. So.
Yeah, I think like the second 2 books I feel like are much more. I feel like I like going back to the thing about how the Final Empire is a great bridge between YA and adult. I think that's really true. I think the second 2 books are much more adult, or feel much more of that kind of high, rich fantasy that you expect. And Vin and Ellen's relationship, I think, like, I like that he didn't have sort of this like fast physical intimacy, more of this like connection that they had because they were both in crises. And I feel like the other 2 books do a better job at sort of developing that relationship. And so it's interesting to see kind of how I wasn't necessarily bothered by like the Insta love, mainly because I think I was so invested in other things that I was like, oh yeah, they're cute. Like, that's awesome. And then I moved on and stuff like that. But I think it was an all right introduction for me.
I think it would be nice rereading it, knowing where their relationship is going to go, and like allowing myself to feel the connection. Whereas just I went in with the same distrust as Vin did, and my distrust stayed for quite a while. And then I was just like, oh, suddenly she trusts him now. Okay, then. Like, so for me, that was like my experience. Whereas she'd already let her guard down before I had. But so, father-daughter. We talked about, Vin and Elend. Do we want more tears from Kaz? I don't know, I kind of like seeing your breakdown. Like it makes me, it makes me like I should reread it so I can feel the things.
Mm.
It's funny because Kaz cries a lot of books and I never cry.
I know, me neither. Like so rarely.
I mean, I do often cry and like there's a tear, but this one I was like, ah!
I don't cry in books, and I sobbed when Kelsier died. Like I first screamed, like it was like a guttural sound that I made when the spear went through him. I freaked out my partner. He was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No." And I'm like, "I'm throwing my phone," and he's like, "You are not." But yeah, I don't really cry in books, so that was fun.
You were like, my book boyfriend has died. This is over.
Yeah,
and your partner is like,
my husband is dead. So give me space.
I definitely don't cry from as many books. Like I think I used to when I was younger, but it takes a lot for me to cry. And I'm not going to say anything, but I did cry in this series, not in the first book though.
Oh, great.
Exactly.
Somebody told me I'm going to cry in the second book, but then I asked somebody who read the second book and she said nothing sad happens, so I'm really confused now as to why you'd be so upset.
I'm like, if you guys are crying now, I'm like, oh, they're in for one.
I have been told I'll cry at the end of the series though, so not looking forward.
Someone that we've not really talked a lot about is this great big, really big and dark Lord Ruler that we should apparently be really afraid of.
One of my things with the setup of this book is that I don't know about the rest of the series, obviously, because I haven't read it, but I kept questioning the significance of this book taking place after the battle has already been won and the Dark Ruler has been in power, or the Dark Lord, or whatever he's called, has been in power for 1,000 years. Because going into this book, it was the start of any fantasy novel anyway, because most of them are about overthrowing the government or freeing people or anything like that. And when you get to the end, obviously, you do realize that it is relevant that the Lord Ruler did win, because that's a big plot twist about who he actually is. But aside from that, like I said, haven't read the other books, so I can't say, like, is it really relevant that he won 1,000 years ago?
Yes.
It's so it is. Okay.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, really cool plot twist. Really appreciate this. But I don't know. I feel like I expected more from the beginning, because that, like, it says it on the cover of my copy. It says, "What if the Dark Lord won?" So I was expecting something immediate from the beginning that was like so different from other fantasy stories, where the state of the world was just kind of the same, if you know what I mean.
I felt robbed. But I mean, obviously, it was like a 5-star. But the summary, everyone's review, even the one I gave because of what I'd heard, what if the Dark Lord won? I'm like, don't fucking tell me that. Like, don't tell me that the Dark Lord won, because at the end of the book, when you find out like that the passages aren't him, like, it was like one of those things where I already had in my head that this guy was bad because the villain won. So when I was reading about the hero in the story, I had it already in my head that I didn't like knowing that it said the villain won at the beginning of the book, on the cover of the book in the summary. For me, it felt like it created this assumption that I already knew that he was the bad guy had won outside of this book. I don't know if I'm making sense. It just annoyed me.
I just want Catherine to speak now. I'm watching her eyes go crazy.
I'm like, I want to say something. I'm not going to say a certain thing until we're finished with the trilogy, so I can explain a little bit of what's going on. But the whole like Lord Ruler winning thing is significant in the Cosmere, but I can't really say until we're finished. So I want you to know it is really significant. Like, it's important. Okay. And knowing beforehand, you're like, oh, he won. Like, it personally didn't bother me, but then when I dug deeper, I was like, oh, okay, this is significant for a reason. And so, yeah, he's like much more important than we think. Or, yeah.
No,
I won't say it.
Actually, he does keep saying, like, what have you done? Like, you don't realize that I was actually helping you, so something terrible is going to happen there because he's dead.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, but honestly, he was doing a pretty shitty job at ruling. Like, how difficult is it to just give us some bloody purple flowers?
I mean, society was stable. It wasn't fair, but it was
wasn't.
stable.
I know, but like that. A blue sky and purple flowers. Just make it look pretty.
And obviously, like, I can't say, but I think that was something that happened. I can't remember what my theory was. No, I can't remember what my theory was.
I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I definitely ended on an ominous tone for me, being like, okay, so now he's dead, now what? Like, because we briefly mentioned this before, like some of us thought that the Lord Ruler arc would extend past the first book. So now that he's dead, I'm like, oh shit, what's the next big bad and how is this going to play out? On a greater scale.
Just, for me, his death felt very, oh, is that all we really needed to do? Like, remove his bloody bracelets? That's basically all she really did. Like, she took all the metal off him, no?
I have something about that was interesting, because upon rereading it, I was like, wait a second, he just died because he had bracelets. But then I realized, and I was like, oh, okay. So, because the Lord Ruler has lived for thousands of years. And what they talk about with allomancy is the older you get, the harder it is for you to hold on to your power. So I assume he probably inserted his power in other metal reserves, like his power of investiture. Sorry, that's just a fancy word for power. So, and that was interesting. So like his bracelets, I think he became weakened because he placed a lot of his power in his bracelets. And then when Vin stabs him, that's like the end. And so there's so much I want to say, but I can't quite yet. But the bracelets are like kind of significant in that way in terms of subtle Cosmere details, but I don't know. It's kind of interesting. So
I was kind of disappointed about the fact that this box that they were trying to get in was just the place that he went to recharge. And I know that's not necessarily a fault with the book. It's just because Kelsier tried to get in so many times and Vin finally got in. And I was like, oh, is this it? Like, I was expecting something like crazy mind-blowing, which I guess maybe I'm just desensitized to fantasy now. But I don't know. I was expecting like something immense.
Me too. Because I also had like a lot of Twitter comments. I was like on page 450 and people are like, oh my God, something's going to happen. And I messaged Jade and I was just like, I think something big is going to happen with the Lord Ruler. Like, I'm just waiting. And especially because we'd had all the passages and I was just like expecting something really big and explosive. And it fell flat for me, that part. Apart from like the general ominous tone of you don't know what you've done. I think my expectations were too high on the end.
Something I did really like, and there was like a little niggling thing at the back of my mind, but I didn't really connect it or think too much into it, was Marsh. Like, I had a fleeting thought when they went and they saw his dead body, but the face was unrecognizable. I was like, well, how do you know it's even him? But then I didn't really dwell on it until...
that was the exact same thing as me, because it's like, he's been flayed. How can you tell who it is based on their muscle and bone? And I was like, oh, maybe. But I completely forgot about him, and it wasn't. Yeah, it was a nice surprise.
Somebody in the chat has said, can we please talk about the Inquisitors?
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
I'm very disturbed by the spikes through the eyes. I'm horrible with things in eyes, so I was like, bleh.
The fan art is disgusting. You're like, shoot,
I looked up the fan art because I was like, what? Yeah. I have like a weird idea of what these people look like now. And then I looked it up. I was just like, fuck, that's weird.
Oh,
that was my reaction.
Everybody watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer in the episode Hush Hush? Because they look like those things, which are the most terrifying things I've ever seen as well. Oh, no.
Yeah, no, I looked up fan art and I was like, oh, that was way worse than what I had in my mind.
For me, like, they remind me a little bit of like a more disturbing version, an adult version of the Coraline Other Family, like with the buttons in their eyes.
Oh, yeah.
Crossed with some kind of steampunk thing.
God, like that, the scene where they kill Vin's father and they're so gleeful about it, and they just have like a sick pleasure from hurting other people. And like when one of them was like in Vin's ear and like choking her, and he was just like impassioned like breathing, I was like, that's so freaky. Oh, I want to know your theories about the spikes. That's interesting.
Wait, was this comment from somebody who has read the series or the first book only? I'm really curious. Whoever commented that. Have you read the whole series?
I want to come back to
about them.
Catherine, are you trying to keep us safe? You're like, wait.
Yeah, I'm like, because if you've read the series, then you probably already have your theories down. But then I was confused. I was like, wait a second, have you read the whole thing? I want to make sure. Or I don't know who commented that, but yeah, there's a lot of interesting things surrounding the spikes.
Ooh, oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
okay. They said the first book, yeah.
Okay, okay, then. Well, you'll see.
The Inquisitors gain be Dementor feelings, where they seem so much worse than the big bad. Yeah, they did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I see, like Dementors or like Death Eaters kind of thing as well.
I will say I imagine them to be a lot beefier than like some of the fan art is.
Speaking of beefier, was it Starzed?
Yeah.
Just like beefed up. And I was just like, and he'd reserved all his energy, and then he was just like hulked out.
Then that description with his little head on top of his beefy body, I was like, this is a weird mental image right now.
This is one of the core reasons why I think that there should be a movie. And I feel like they're just waiting, hopefully, for the Star Wars franchise to be done. As Becca lightly mentioned in one of like your recent wrap-ups, you were just like, this reminds me of Star Wars. Was it you who said that?
I think it might have been because I'm trying to convince Curtis to read it by telling him that the fighting's like Star Wars.
It is though. It reminds me a lot of it, and just
the 2000s trilogy. That one.
It's so cinematic.
I mean,
I think I'm not sure and I necessarily would want them to tell this particular story, but I would like a story in the Mistborn world. I think it's one of those series where you could very easily please the fans by not telling the actual story, but the world is so great for TV and cinema that they could just set something in that world, like that goes alongside or set before or after or something like that.
Yeah, what's interesting about like Mistborn is that there will be completed 4 different stories. It's like this is the first era, the second era, besides the 4th book. Rip, wax and wane 4. And then there will be another era in like our present time. And then the 4th era is like in the future. So, which I think is really cool. So this first era is kind of like, oh, it's past. And so the next era is like, what'd you say?
I said, holy crap.
I know. It's not genius. So like, honestly, so I'm really excited to see what Sanderson does with like film. I'm sure it'll come to film at some point. If it doesn't, I will riot. Like it will happen. But I think
it's really quickly, to be fair, for the size of the books that he writes and how complex they are, like he's pretty good at churning them out. He's no George Orwell.
Yeah, he's kind of a madman. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he's a ferrochemist himself and he just like stores up his own reserves and writes a ton of books. But I'm really excited to see what he does. So honestly, there's so much he could do with this world, whether it's in like whatever period of time he decides to work with. I think it would be really cool to see that on screen because the choreography would be super cool. So
yeah, those fight scenes, I could picture them so vividly. They were just like you mentioned, Becca, like superhero-esque, and like was like the fighting reminded me of superhero action scenes. I was like, this is so dramatic. And some of like the grand entrances where like Vin smashes through the ceiling, I was like, this is so dramatic and I love it.
Also reminds me, like choreography wise, of the first episode of The Witcher.
Yes.
The best fight scene. Yeah, like so it'd be things like some bits would be in slow-mo, like the cameras would be like pulling out. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
I imagine that with like when they're tossing their coins, like the slow-mo of the coin. Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of like a mix between like Matrix and Star Wars, but in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way that I see those scenes.
Honestly, I got kind of like Spider-Man vibes when they're throwing the coins and like getting to the next place and like going through the mist. Sans the webs, but just like and just like I was like, this is great. Any action scene that was in this book made me like like all the other action scenes in my other books completely lost appreciation. I was like, no.
I find action scenes, it's not, I know a lot of people don't like them. It's not that I don't like them. It's just I find them very hard to follow. Whereas these I have no problem. And I did notice, I wasn't very active in the Discord, but I do get the notifications for it because I haven't muted them. And I did notice a lot of people, or quite a few people, saying that they didn't really like the action scenes. but I just thought they were like super absorbing and really easy to follow. And I don't know whether that's because of how they were written or whether it's because of how Brandon Sanderson wrote the setup, so you know the like scientific ways that it works, so you can picture that a lot more clearly.
I have to agree with that. I think like the straightforwardness of it was like helped me follow along, because I'm kind of the same way with certain action scenes. I'm like, and they fought, and I just like imagine, you know, instead of like the logistics of how they thought. Like, I love how deep it is, but I can follow along, and I'm almost like, and then he chopped this, and then he threw this, and then whatever. I was able to follow along that way as well, Becca. So
yeah. I also loved when they like pushed and pulled the coins against other random soldiers. Like,
and then people are just flying
in the air. Yeah, they just like came out of nowhere, so insignificant, but they're just like, phew. It's great. Oh, yes. The scene where Vin killed Sean.
Oh, that was a great scene.
That
was
because I liked that one because it was so contained. Like, I find actually with the larger scenes, I get a little bit lost, and then I'm just like, okay, I'll just wait until it's over and they'll tell me who died. Because there's always like, you know, you have these epic fantasy scenes and you're just like, okay, I'll just end of the chapter. That's when it gets good. But this one was so contained and it was just them and it was girl on girl. And I'm like, okay. I was actually really interested in that one. I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the fight before Kelsier died, the one with the Inquisitor where he was freeing all the slaves. That's one that stood out for me. Well, they weren't slaves, they were just whoever was around at the time. They were the nobles from Reynard's estate, weren't they? In the cages.
The part where he like gets all the random metal shards and are just like constantly trying to get the Inquisitor, then he's like, pooh, and then it's like lets all the shards go away, and then he's like, come back to the Inquisitor. It was very
I will admit it is frustrating when he's about to do something and the Inquisitor stops it and I'm like, no.
Yeah. Damn Inquisitors.
A lot of this reminds me of in Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore is battling Voldemort and he has like the glass shards and he throws them at Dumbledore, and then it turns into sand. A different concept, but like that idea sort of like I couldn't help but think about that. And like this is just an aside, not like a big spoiler for Era 2, but like in that era it takes place during like it's like a steampunk sort of Western style, and so they're like guns for coins. So like I cannot help but imagine it kind of like that, which is sort of fun. So but I think it's cool how he uses like how he describes like the fighting of this, and I just imagine like different movie scenes and stuff like that. So I think it's cool because it's like I subjectively imagine like how certain scenes relate to other movie scenes, but I just thought that was really interesting. So
for those of us that haven't read book 2, what do we possibly think the plotline might be?
Ooh.
I think it's going to have something to do with whatever the Lord Ruler is saving them from. I think this is my theory. I really can't remember it clearly right now, but there was something that the hero, the prophesized hero, was supposed to do with, what was it called? The thing that we're going to.
The deepness.
Yeah.
Well of Ascension?
The deepness.
And I think maybe that the hero was supposed to vanquish it, but the Dark Lord absorbed it and was containing it. Maybe.
Which is why then the world was breaking apart, because he was desperately trying to like...
Because he released it.
Oh, because he released it.
Well, I'm assuming that he's done something and it was that created the world as it is, but I think that he was maybe keeping it under control.
Becky, you have a question in the chat as well. I think somebody asked you a question on whether you saw Kelsier's death coming. Or was it him dying?
I knew that he was setting himself out to be a martyr. I didn't know whether it was a contingency plan or whether it was something that he actually intended to do. But I saw pretty much from that first moment where Vin was behind the scenes with the guy who controls emotions and Kelsier started to show off. From that moment, he just kept building on that image. So I had a feeling he was going to die at some point. I didn't know it was going to be exactly then, but when it happened, it didn't take me by surprise, and I didn't expect him to come back because I had seen, and then some of the things that he said like affirmed that. So yeah, I wasn't surprised when it happened. I knew it was coming, but not like at that point.
Yeah. Someone say, is that why the ash was raining down?
The ash comes from the ash mounts.
Mhm.
Like, wait, what was your question? Sorry.
I don't know.
I
Actually.
think it's to do with me saying about the deepness and like that it was released or like he's content of it and now it's free in the world to do whatever it is that it does because we don't know what it is.
Show no expressions.
I know, everybody's
So
just like
hard not
Catherine lol.
to. So I'm like, I'm gonna duck down here. So I
I hate being this person. We
This
need
is
to
me
do
in the
reading. I hate it for Robin Hobb as well, and Game of Thrones, where you have a theory and you've got somebody just like who knows what happens, and you're just looking at them for approval.
The thing is, like, you want to know.
One because I'd read Dark Dawn and everyone's
Yes,
like, "Oh, my
that was
theories,"
so
and I'm like, "I'm
funny.
just gonna sit here."
I know.
No, I need to like get out right now.
I am excited for Vin to get a really big sword because I think that's on one of the new US covers where she's got a massive sword. I'm really excited for that. It's like enormous. It's like 3 times her body size. It's like huge.
That's cool.
Someone said, I'm surprised she didn't show her face when they...
I know I've been ignoring the comments. Being
I
like,
don't need to look at them. Some of them I think they're going to spoil things for us. I literally have no
I
idea.
need to look at them.
leave us ignorant.
I actually haven't seen anybody saying anything really in the thing apart from like the next book's really good or oh you're gonna cry at the next book. Like somebody has said in the chat that I am specifically going to cry in
Yeah.
and I don't know why.
I love everybody calling me out on my face. So
I know.
sorry, off tangent, but I see those comments now.
I think the next live show that we're going to be having for this is going to be in July. Is that right?
Wow.
Question mark. I'm asking myself as like the organizer.
I know the schedule is super tight for me doing 2 high fantasy read-alongs because I was going to do one book. It's going to get to a point where I have like 3 days to read one book. There's like 700 pages.
I'm going to like just look at the Google Doc quickly. It's funny because whenever I go over to the Google Doc, there's always people in it. And I'm thinking, how many people are reading? Literally, there's 5 people who are looking at the Google Doc right now.
I think the next one's on my channel. That's what it's scheduled for.
Yeah, potentially. I think that it's on, I think that we said August 8th, which is very, no, I didn't. No, I didn't at all. I said June 21st.
Wow.
Yeah, we can do that, can't we, guys?
I mean, I can, but like, Rach, you're the one that lags behind. Like the reading.
I do not. No, I read this one in plenty of time. Like I read this one like a week and a half ago. The next one is 780 or so pages, depending on which you've got. And I've actually got it down as Jade's channel, June 21st.
Oh.
And then Becca's channel, August 8th. But we can also just
yeah, I keep thinking because it's the 3rd live show, I keep thinking it's the 3rd book. Because I know book in the trilogy is my channel, yeah.
Okay, so wait, I'm next and it's in June?
It's in June. It's the end of June. If you're around.
I hope I'm around. Okay.
Someone's like, set a time for the live stream. I'll read it 3 days before. Like, good. You know, we've got you. We'll do that for you.
No matter how excited I am to read the next book in whatever I'm doing, I always leave it till the last week, which is good because then my thoughts are fresh, but also bad because then I have to read an 800-page book in like 5 days.
Higher stress and still it's so much better for a live stream, just finishing it and being like, okay, I have all these thoughts now, especially on a book like this, when there's so much to talk about. Just is everybody in the chat planning to read along with us? Are you planning to like continue it? Are you like in for the ride in terms of the Cosmere, or have you like just jumped on the roller coaster now? Let us know. And then does anybody have like any final thoughts or any further things that we like did not talk about?
I popped up this interesting question from Wicked West Books.
Yep.
Which metal would you most like to be able to burn?
See, I'm gonna have to go to my metal guide now.
Oh, I have my notes.
I have a metal guide in the back.
I haven't thought much about it, but I'm immediately drawn to the Soother.
Absolutely.
I like iron and steel, but I don't know which one I would want.
I know.
I mean, that would be cool, but I'm also terrified of heights, so would I actually use it?
Well, if you have iron, like you don't have to get up. Just put if you want to drink, just put it in a metal cup. You don't have to get up.
I honestly think it would be Soother for me as well, just because that's my personality type.
Yeah, I would like.
No
It's so
conflict,
funny
thank
because I would. Oh, sorry. What was that?
Oh, I was just like, I don't like conflict, so I can just
I
chill
feel
everyone
I
out.
feel that. For me, for like a lot of personal reasons, like I would do pewter enhancing physical abilities. Like just a lot. Like, I could go off on a tangent about why I need that in my life. Because I would also apply it to like mentally, like my physical abilities are like my body and my mind, and I'm like, I need that, please. So yeah.
I think if I couldn't be like a soother, I'd probably want to actually be, which one is it? Oh, a seeker. Because I hate not knowing things, and like I also have like
That massive eye roll. We should see her with Christmas presents. It's not pretty.
No, I'm not a pretty person around Christmas. But yeah, I would want to know, like, if I was being soothed, if other people were doing this, to know what abilities each person has. It would just be really useful for me. But if I wanted, I would also see soothing as incredibly useful, like in my day in life.
I've just looked, and I think I would actually like tin, because that's the one that enhances your senses, and I could really do with something that would help me to multitask even more.
Becca.
So like,
I think that you need brass and soothing just for yourself.
No, I just need. If I had tin, I would get everything done quicker, and then I would have more time to do things for myself.
Or you'd become addicted, and you would just like go insane because of how much you'd rely on it.
Yeah, I 100%. If I had tin, I would just do more. I wouldn't rest. I'd just take on more responsibility and carry on.
I feel like I wouldn't be able to separate the senses, and I get too distracted or overwhelmed by everything.
Oh,
yeah, that'd probably do me in. I actually thought it was really interesting when Vin loses all of her allomancy for a moment, like it's taken away. And she's just like, she felt like she was going in slow motion, and then she was like, oh God, like you could just tell, like she was so like put out about like not having any of these different things, and she's like, I didn't realize I was using it that much. Like,
I really liked that, because when she was put in that situation, I kept being like, just do this, and then realizing that she can't. It was really frustrating.
Yeah, I was very frustrated for her.
Scarlet Moon Creations asked us, guys, would you rather be an allomancer or a ferrochemist?
Allomancer.
Allomancer.
I
do like exploring knowledge, though.
Yeah, that would be cool. Like, I feel like the Ravenclaw part of me would be like, I want to know everything, but it would be so much more of an inconvenience to have to store up things. And Sazed even said, he's like, yeah, ferrochemy's not necessarily more powerful than allomancy. Like, it's also just kind of complicated in a lot of ways, and I would enjoy allomancy so much more. I would just have the time of my life.
It's a lot of long-term effort.
Ooh.
What was that?
What'd you say, Cass?
I was going to say it's a lot of long-term effort, and I'm lazy. But what did you say?
Patience.
Abby Wilson said, other than Vin, there's not a lot of women in characters in the Final Empire. I really felt this took away from the story. What are your thoughts? So we kind of saw this in Elantris as well, and I know that it's something that has been brought up over in the Discord. The fact that in every single Brandon Sanderson book that one person had read so far, there is one single female main character, and they've all got something slightly different about each other. Like, for instance, Serene in Elantris is unusually tall, and also like the only woman diplomat in, in the Elantris area in Kai. And in this, it's Vin. It's Vin, yeah. Are there any of the females apart from the bloody one that she killed?
For me, it's like
Kliss, the gossiper.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
She was again, like the only other
female
one that played some sort of role. Yeah.
So far, I wouldn't say that he's good at developing female-female relationships, and he could have had another female within the group that was significant.
I believe I've heard from Cody that he gets better at writing female characters in the Stormlight archives. I don't know how many there are. I don't know if there's still only one of them.
There's like, so what's interesting, so it's funny because like looking at Mistborn and Elantris, I feel like those aren't the best examples of like female, like Warbreaker does a really great job. Stormlight Archive does a fantastic job. And so for me, like, something I personally like it didn't really bother me in Elantris so much. What I liked about Mistborn, and this might be a little bit of an unpopular opinion, like I sort of like the trope where there is like you're the minority in the like, which is interesting because yes, I don't know how to explain this. For this particular story, and especially in the other two books, it didn't bother me because I think it's important. Like there should obviously be more female characters, but in this case, I wasn't too bothered by it because I kind of liked that Vin was sort of understanding this feminine side of her on her own. I found that to be a very interesting dynamic, and I know that's maybe an interesting opinion, but it didn't really bother me. But like I almost guarantee like it gets so much better, specifically in Warbreaker, and like Stormlight, best characterization Sanderson has ever done. And I'm like so excited for you guys to read that because it's so good.
I think this is something that we have to think about as well, like following him as an evolution as an author. And I think that Elantris was one of his first published novels. And I adored that. And this one I can see a far more, a far more unique magic system and world. And I understood what he was trying to achieve. I just kind of I fell hook, line, and sinker for Elantris, and it was just like read at the perfect time, and I understood everything. And for this one, there was just an emotional distance. But I'm really looking forward to seeing some of his, as you say, like the better versions of him in the later stage in his writing. But that's the beauty in following an author from kind of start to finish, even though right now we're probably going to start bouncing around considering his writing tactics in terms of timelines. But I don't know.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear like that he has more characters and he gets better at doing that, because for me it's like a missed opportunity because I do like how he writes women. That's something where like I have liked both Sereni and Vin very, very much, and I feel like they're so dynamic that I'm like I want more of these types of characters. So that's my only thing is like I'm like this is such a missed opportunity. If you can write women like this, do it more. Hearing that he does
second that. Yeah, I second that. Especially since because I found that with Shan and Kliss, when we understand like some of the reveals about them, I was like, that's so interesting. I wish they'd been developed more. I would have really loved that. So I feel like there's the potential there, and he is able to craft them well, but we just haven't seen much of it yet.
I think Rhiannon made a good point in the chat. It's like scrolled up a bit now, but she said that if Vin wasn't in the position that she is, like if females aren't noble in this world, then they're likely in brothels, which it is made a point of in the book that Vin would be in a brothel. And the only reason she isn't is because various people have protected her entire life. I can't say I really noticed the lack of female characters in it, and I think because Vin is a well-written character to me. Like I thought that her portrayal was fine. I enjoyed her character. So I think if it was an entirely male cast, then it would have been glaringly obvious. But having such a like really well-written female character at the forefront of the novel, I didn't notice that there weren't more women in it.
Yeah, I think I also found this when I was reading Name of the Wind. Like I love it, and yeah, Patrick Rothfuss does not so far write good female characters, and in fact I would say that Brandon Sanderson so far does a much better job, so I feel it's slightly nitpicking at what we can, but I think when someone writes such a fantastic set of books as him, like you just find like small things that you can say, like, was that representation done very well? Could we do with more women? Yes, of course.
I think
could we do with more people? Yes, of course. 2006
fantasy was still predominantly written for men in general.
Yeah. Even though there's more women readers.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I believe that fantasy started out as a genre for women, and then it got took over by men, and then it's come back to women again. But yeah, 2006. I think it's a good balance, especially if at that time fantasy was still predominantly written for men, to have a female character as the main character and then a lot of supporting male characters.
Yeah, I think that's what I liked about like this first, and there are more female characters kind of introduced in the second two books, but like that's what I kind of liked about this first book was like Vin sort of finding her way in this world. Like I feel like almost it's a reverse effect where Sanderson, I mean, I don't know if this was his intention, but sort of placing this, what it's like for a female to be in the minority sort of a sense. That's what at least I got out of it. And that's why I sort of liked it, is that, like, I don't know. And also I'm just more so thinking of like the ska, specifically the fact how there are more men who stay alive than women because the women are raped and
Yeah.
you know, so that was my thing. I was like, I'm not too bothered by it, mainly because I kind of like the trope that it's used, but also just the culture and how brutal the society is. I think most of the female characters are noble women. Not that there obviously aren't female ska, but that most of them are, I think, I don't know. That was just kind of a thing I noticed. So
yeah,
I think they take very traditional roles as well in the household. So you wouldn't see many women around unless, well, yeah, you wouldn't, because they'd be either at home or there's a lot of them that were sold into brothels.
I'm actually wondering more about Vin's mom. And just like if Catherine, you did such a poor job just now.
I'm so sorry. I have no poker face. Somebody told me that. And I was like, no.
it's my favorite though, because I like having tidbits. So
yeah, no, that's great. God, I'm on the right path. But yeah, I did wonder more about her because until that moment I was like, right, there aren't many women and you don't hear about them very often. You're not even really seeing them in a home or anything like that. You're just not really seeing, you don't see many of the ska in like their day in the life. You only see them in regards to the rebellion and stuff like that, except for the mother, and knowing the backstory of the brother afterwards and like the way he painted the story and like all of those things, I'm wondering if there's not way more to that as far as what is being presented by the brother.
I'm so excited now with everybody's reactions actually in the chat and both also on Catherine's face. That's another thing that I need to know more about, so I like that.
Yeah.
I want to give like a little preface about the second book. Like sometimes a lot of people kind of dislike the second book. They're like, oh, it's so slow. I like just want to like give my blessing and promise like the payoff is so worth it, because Sanderson develops things like kind of slowly in a lot of ways, but it's so worth it. So I just want to say that for anybody like watching right now who hasn't read the second book, like if you feel like, oh my gosh, this is so slow, like please be patient. I promise it'll. But some people, like, I loved The Well of Ascension so much, but it definitely is slower than the first book. So I just want to give that fair warning for those of you who may feel like, what is this? It does get better. So.
It's interesting because in the comments of my vlog and my wrap-up, pretty much everybody has said it's their favorite book in the series for the second book.
Murphy said it was the favorite book in the series for her as well, but she's heard other people also say it's very slow.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay, that helps kind of validate me, because my first thought when I was hearing those slows, I was actually excited, which might be an unpopular thing, but I was like, oh, great, because I get more time with these characters and I'm going to get more development out of them. And like, if I'm enjoying a series, I kind of want it to be slow. I like am happy with a slow book if I'm enjoying it. So I'm like, oh, cool, yeah, give me the day in the life. Give me an entire episode dedicated to them, grocery shopping together. Give me the character development. So I don't mind.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, actually, because I was really like, when I was reading The Final Empire, I didn't want them to go through with the plan, because I think Vin had these feelings as well, where she didn't want the current dynamic to end, and I was like, I don't want you to go through with this, because I had a feeling Kelsier was going to die for a start. And of course, like everything would be different, and there'd be injuries. I was just kind of enjoying the middle section of the book. It was, I think, the bits that I didn't like as much are the bits where Vin was at Reynard's manor, and that was like the slower parts for me. But aside from that, like I really loved it when they just weren't really doing anything.
Yeah.
Rachel, when did Millie get to the size of a small dog?
She's over a year old now, so she's like fully grown, but she's a big cat. Like there's zero fat on her. Like I've searched for it. But she's just literally fluff. And I'll attest, because she accidentally ended up in the bath the other day. So this is like diverting. She ended up in the bath while I was soaking something in like extreme washing stuff, so like really like high power cleaner. And so then me and my partner had to hold on to Millie in the shower and like spray it full of water. And it was like the most traumatic experience for her. But then you really saw that there was literally nothing to her other than fluff. At all. So yeah, you're a big girl now, aren't you? Yeah, she's a big girl now. But just thank you so much, everybody, for joining and for being with us on this. If you've got any more questions, then like just put them in now, or you can ask us over on Twitter, or as you know, there is a Discord as well. I don't know if it's in the description of this video, but you can just go over to the Cosmere. Oh, lovely. It's over on the Twitter.
The last live show.
Kaz is also, I think that most of you are probably in like her 6-hour live stream, but you've just set up a Discord channel, haven't you, to organize reading sprints and things.
So I can get through these books before 3 a.m. the night before.
You could do is setting up a Patreon for that, because I'm sure that people would actually join and pay for it.
Oh my gosh.
Know your value.
One thing I will say, I had this thought as I was going to bed last night. I was like, just imagine the look on his face and the reaction of Ellen's father after he realizes he's king.
Oh, I can't. Yeah, I really want a reaction out of that man.
Like,
I want him to know he left his son to go be king. Like, jokes on him.
Catherine. Oh God, that man infuriated me.
Yeah.
Not fun.
I mean, he tried to kill his son. Like, just.
What? I really want Ellen to like find out that it was his father behind like the assassination attempt.
I thought that it was kind that he wasn't told, but yeah, I feel like in order for that man to not become a leech, he needs to be removed.
Exactly.
We have one final question I think we're going to answer, which is, how do you guys feel about the Mist Wraiths? I think also Scarlet Moon Creations said earlier that they found the Mist Wraiths creepier than the Inquisitors. Potentially,
I do find them a little bit creepy. I imagine the way they walk, kind of like the Grudge. I don't know.
Yes.
Oh.
I see that.
I was thinking of, what are they called? Those really blobby things from the Maze Runner.
Didn't watch that one.
I think so, yeah. I don't know. I just got that.
Is that what they're called?
Not from the movie, though. From the my imagining of them from the books, not the movie.
Okay.
I'm just looking at fan art now. They're not too bad.
I've not looked at the Mist Wraiths fan art, but it's always helpful looking at fan art and being like, okay, how are they meant to be?
I think my reaction to them is kind of like my reaction to spiders. Are they harmless? Yes. Does that mean that they should live? No.
I like that. So, as we said before, the next live stream is probably going to be around June time, and it will be on Jaded Reader's channel. Jade is this lovely lady in the bottom right. I'll have to remind myself. So please make sure that you're subscribed to her channel. Go over there now, and other than that, just stay tuned on both the Discord and also our Twitter page. And the Discord's really active, so be over there and just talking amongst yourselves as we start the Well of Ascension. And this time for this month, I will be doing the reading sprints over there. I did it a lot for Elantris, didn't do it a lot for this one, and you can see where there was an error there. So I need to connect with you all and connect with the book a little bit better for Well of Ascension. But I'm really looking forward to it, and thank you so much, Kaz, for hosting it on your channel. I really, really appreciate sharing the load around. It's nicer.
Great time. And thank you for running this whole show and this discussion. It's been a really fun time.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. I'll say goodbye.
Oh, wow.